We're live.
We're
And
alive.
Someone's feeling spicy. And I'm prepared like I have my iPad.
You normally do have your
there's
iPad.
only 6% on it, so I'll have to memorize this really long list of topics here. It's not that long. That's why it was funny.
Got it. They could hear it in this
Welcome to episode 9 of After Bedtime, which apparently we're not the only After Bedtime podcast.
Yeah, awkward moment.
We're gonna outlast that other couple. This is After Bedtime with Stevan
and Kelsey.
You always think that I'm gonna say your name.
No, I don't. I like acting like that's
you like
just
the
part
awkward
of it.
pause?
Yes.
Okay, that's our thing. Fair enough.
It's almost like I'm not really fully paying attention, or I don't know. I thought it was funny, but thanks for making it clear that it's not.
No, it is funny. It is funny. It is funny now that I know you're intentionally doing it. I didn't know that you were intentionally doing it.
I've intentionally done it every single time.
I'm so much more excited about recording these now that I don't am constantly worried about the feedback on the microphones.
I mean, this microphone that I'm using right now, it's a 50-50 shot.
No, that one works fine. I think part of it too was the fact that the computer, we had 2 microphones that were identical, and the computer probably had a hard time telling which was which. That's one of my theories.
I know, so then I'm not going to get a special little microphone like you have?
No, you can get a special microphone. That's fine. That's fine. I'm cool with that.
It just can't be the same one?
No, it can be the same one.
I'm just confused on your logic there.
I don't know if it's really right. I don't know if my logic is correct. It's just one of my theories. So we could get another identical microphone or a similar microphone, and then we'd test my theory again.
Okay.
You should have been like an engineer or something.
You're
the person who just constantly is why? You would have made a great physicist or a great engineer, because you would have gotten to the root. You would have wanted to go to the most fundamental and basic science there is. Let me hit you with an Instagram post that I saved.
All for the gram.
I saw this. I don't actually know where I saw this. I think I may have seen it on... I think it was just actually one of the people I follow on Instagram's on their story, because it's from one of those no-name accounts, just the meme accounts that just post funny stuff, or they post quotes. But the post says, focus on why it bothers you, not what he or she said.
Are you saying this for a reason?
No, nothing. It has nothing to do with us.
This post reminds me of Kelsey.
No, that's not.
So let's bring it up in the middle of the podcast so that she can
it's just a conversation starter. But when I saw it, I was like, man, that. So sometimes I have, I just had this happen the other day. There's things that I feel, and things that I think about, and things that I know, but sometimes I have difficulty finding the right words to express that sentiment, right?
I think that's extremely funny that you say that, because I find you as one of the best people with words.
I can be articulate, and I can sometimes...
Especially up against me.
But sometimes I... I may be able to express myself, but there are times when I feel I come across something like this, what this post says, that it's just bam, yes, that nails it, on the head. Even today, I was listening to Eric Thomas, who's he's this Eric Thomas. There's more than one Eric Thomas, but this Eric Thomas, he's a motivational speaker. And you've probably heard some of his videos and seen some of the stuff. But in the video I was watching today of him, he said something. He said, I dare you. He was I dare you to spend a year failing at X or whatever it was. And it was it perfectly succinctly wraps up this sense that like failure is going to lead to success. Like it's very hard to continually fail at something and not get better at it.
Yeah.
But so many times like we fail once and we stop. Anyways, that my point being that this one really summed up a point that I think we talked about a little bit on our road trip to Colombia, but this idea that you really should be more concerned with like your actions and your reactions than the actions of others or the thoughts of others. And that sentence, focus on why it bothers you, not what he or she said, forces you to orient yourself that way, right? Like if someone says something that bothers you, instead of reacting to it, right, or putting it on them, it very quickly kind of opens your eyes to, man, I wonder what it is about that bothers me. What in my past or what in my interactions with this person, what's driving those feelings? It leads to that introspection that I think that's where a lot of like uncovering yourself and your motivations and who you are, that sometimes maybe it's hard to find your way there. Like it's hard to sit down and just be like, let's be introspective.
Yeah. Versus
things like this.
Especially when you hear something that does normally make you reactive. It's very hard for you to like pause for a second and be like, first of all, is this really that big of a deal?
Should I be reacting this way? Is this an appropriate response or a proportional response to what was said?
Yeah.
And maybe even that's an even better point, is like when your response seems inappropriate or disproportional, that's probably even a bigger red flag that there's something there that you probably should
work through.
Yeah, work through. That's a good one, I thought.
Yeah, I like that.
Talk to me.
You didn't really like get my input on that.
Oh, well, share your input. What does that mean to you, or what's that? I mean, do you like it?
I do like it, and it kind of almost like, as I was sitting here thinking about it, when you were talking, I was like, it's not necessarily the words that people say to me, it's that my biggest issue that I struggle with is people's tone. If people come across like aggressive or angry towards me, I react very quickly to that more than anything.
And but again, like that at least.
But I legitimately was just sitting here being like, but why do I react to certain
Which
tones?
is probably not a simple, easy answer on most of these things, but it does like it gives you something to stumble over for the first time, to stop and be like, wonder what that is about.
Yeah.
Which I think that's more of what we need, right? That's kind of that iterative process of trying to figure yourself out as a person, like in all the different roles you play, and how maybe you're carrying stuff with you that you don't even realize you're carrying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I even realize now that like we became parents, I'm realizing more of what I'm carrying than I was even aware of before. You okay?
Yeah, I was, for some reason in my head, I was worried that...
It's because you are literally on the track of something's going wrong. This was too easy of a setup.
I'm producing, but I'm participating. But I for some reason in my head, I was like, I don't think I started recording the video, but I did, so it's all good. Continue with what you're saying.
I don't remember what
I see. I messed up your train of thought. Okay, fair enough.
What were we... Help me jog my memory. What were we just discussing?
We're talking about this quote and how it gives you something to stumble over. Like when you feel like you want, like somebody says something to you that amps you up, that bothers you or bugs you, instead of being like, rah, 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 and jumping back at that person, you force yourself to say, And then I was saying that like you're carrying that also helps you
Yes, I
recognize
was
when you're
saying
carrying
that as-
baggage that you should
As
have.
a parent, now that we have become parents, I have seen issues that, not necessarily issues, but I guess slight emotional baggage that me and you do carry with, that wasn't there in just our relationship, or maybe little cues were there, but I've started to see more and more just in our parenting styles or stuff like that, stuff that we are actually carrying with us, and it kind of like scares me a little bit sometimes, just more on the front of I don't, just because I'm carrying it with me, I don't want our boys to end up carrying it with them because I didn't work on it.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that at one point, like how you can't let all your messed upness or all your issues
Yeah.
pass on to your kids, and that's why it's so important for you to figure those things out, because your kids are inevitably going to become most of what you are, right?
I do feel like our podcast is kind of like taking on a little like trend every week. We always end up talking about like emotions and working through your, pardon my language, shit. But like, you know, like,
no, yeah,
it always ends up back there.
That's why, though, like I was saying, like that's one of the things I like about doing this podcast, is because it's helpful to like just talk about some of these things, because I think, and like to your point, I think these are the important things. Like these are the things that matter: your relationships, your communication, figuring your shit out so you can be a better person for your kids or your partner or your work or whatever it is. It's such important work and there aren't a lot of like public conversations happening about it.
I think excuse me. I think we're on a trend of, see, everyone says that like millennials and stuff are lazy or we're weak in a sense, but I don't think we are. I think we're a very strong generation, and I think that that's where it's starting to change, of where emotion is being talked about, and it's becoming a more real situation that you need to take care of your emotional self just as much as you need to take care of some, like every rest of your aspect of your life. You know, your physical health and your emotional health is just as important, because I mean, we are the generation of the mass divorce rate, and I think that all of us were like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not going into a world, like a marriage, knowing that there's an escape route. Which I mean, there's two sides to each coin there. There is a lot of our generation out there that doesn't even want to get married, or they are using divorce as like the easy button.
I think just like in the macro perspective, I think there's more conversations about mental health happening, right?
Yeah.
And there's more recognition about the importance that mental health, emotional health play in your life, which I think is good. But then there's also not, to me, in my opinion, there's not a lot of content out there about how to strategically work through that and what that looks like, and how it really isn't clear cut. It's really this messy, always evolving, iterative thing.
But I do think that we are getting there. I think there's been a lot of people who've become more comfortable in themselves of speaking out and being like, hey, it's okay if you feel this way. It's okay that you're depressed sometimes or have anxiety or stuff like that. And now I personally have seen, really, to tell you the truth, on TikTok, there has been this like slight rise in like people in the psychology world and doctors and stuff now jumping on to TikTok to spread like little facts or little information, or like I follow this one chick that gives tips on how to control an anxiety attack whenever you're starting to go into one, or tips
yeah, see, like
that.
that's the stuff though that that to me is what's interesting. Like the awareness of it's great, the normalizing of it great. Like I like all that, but then like to me the and this is purely from a very personal perspective. It's just how I am. Is like great. There's a problem. We've acknowledged the problem. I care less about hashing the problem, more about what's the solution here. What maybe it's not a solution, but what can I do to improve this? What can I do to move forward and start to level this up? Like, great, I have marital communication problems. Okay, what's step one to address that, right? Like,
well, I think it's becoming more available, but I also think that the biggest thing is that the first thing is you need to recognize that it's happening, and then the second thing is that it's not like
well, and I think
you yourself needs to do the work to find where you need to go or what you need to do.
And I think that's where, to me, like you're saying, you're seeing that trend continue, and I hope it does. I just don't want us to get stuck in like, it's okay to be anxious and depressed, and then people just, that's where they stay. Like, I'm an anxious and depressed person.
I don't necessarily.
And
I don't think
where I'd
that's
rather
true.
be like, yes, you're anxious and depressed now, but you're not an anxious and depressed person. You're just experiencing those emotions.
But I think, but the biggest thing is that in an emergency situation, you need to treat the bleeding before you fix what's actually going on.
You're right, and I'm not saying that.
So if people are getting tips on how to recognize when they're starting to feel anxious, to figure out how to control that anxiety and then bring it back down, and then they can
but that to me that's
figure out what's going on.
To me, that's that conversation, because I'm not saying people are going to solve their anxiety. You may have anxiety for the rest of your life, but talking about it and talking about how you address it and how you deal with it on a day-to-day basis and how you don't let it control your life and how you're able to control it.
Yeah.
That I think is the most productive conversation. It's the most empowering conversation in my personal opinion. Well, I think it's good that people can be more open about it, and that gives other people the opportunity to be vulnerable about it, which I think is not something that was not the way it was in the past. It was much more stigmatized. It's not stigmatized now, but I also don't want it to become like a badge of like honor where it's like, oh, I have anxiety, which makes me cool. It makes me hip and trendy. Like,
I get where
you know what I mean?
About it, but I don't.
Or
I think that's inevitable.
Not just anxiety.
Think that is not like, I don't feel like it's sad if people are going to do that, because then that kind of makes me feel like people are going to wear it as a badge of honor even if they don't actually have those issues. But I feel like the people who legitimately have these issues don't want to feel like this.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm not just singling out anxiety or depression. I'm saying the whole spectrum of emotional and mental struggles in all levels of severity, to the very minor to the very extreme, things that make it difficult to live your life. You always worry that the pendulum's going to swing too far, and because I think that's my biggest concern is when people begin to wrap their identity up in those things, right? Like, and that's something you see with like chronically ill people. Like you see with chronically ill people is like they wrap themselves up in their disease, and then it becomes who they are instead of like, this is just something I deal with, and this is how I work through it, and this is just a part of me.
You have that of all aspects of life. You have women that are losing their identity.
No, you're right.
As being a mom. You have people who lose their identity because they do CrossFit. I mean, like, that's literally in every aspect of.
No, I mean that's fair. That was just me sharing my, like, it doesn't make like my concern nil and void because that's everything.
No, I'm
you know
not
what I mean?
saying
Like
that.
I 100% recognize that you're gonna see that no matter what. That's a bell curve, but I think it should be a bell curve. It shouldn't be like everyone shifted to that end of the spectrum and that end of the conversation, to me, because it just seems uninteresting. It's like, well, that's great. I guess just be over there and talk about how you guys are all feeling depressed and anxious. instead of, I would rather like hear how those people are dealing with that. What are the things that are helping them? What are the things that are benefiting them? And I think that's where like conversations like ours, or what our podcast keeps coming back to, I think is part of that, is like being open and honest about how all these different communication, relationship things, what are the tactical day-to-day, how does it look?
Yeah.
That being said, because our generation is doing so many things to improve things, tell me about this new show that you are watching.
I said that we would.
No, I want to hear about it now. We can talk about it. Okay.
But you're not going to actually watch it, so it kind of just makes it like no point of actually talking about it.
All right, I will commit to watching a episode with you. And if it gets my interest.
I think just on the level of the social experiment in general.
Hold on, we got to build context, because we talked about how great our generation is doing it, like opening up.
Okay, so like Netflix,
we're becoming more enlightened when it comes to communication. But then we also do things like this.
Well, I mean, Netflix has now started their own little realm of like.
I'd say the reality shows.
Reality shows.
Yeah. That would be the category.
The first one I watched was The Circle. Awesome. And literally you watch the trailers of these shows and you're like, this is crap. And then I start watching and I can't stop. And I'm like done in 2 seconds. But I also know that about myself, because I do enjoy sometimes to watch trash TV. And everyone does it at one point of their life because it just makes them feel a little bit better about themselves.
Well, yeah, there's something wrong with having those guilty pleasures.
Oh, I mean, I eat that crap up. And so...
And it doesn't matter how many times you put on Jersey Shore, I always get sucked into it.
But see, that is a guilty pleasure that I will admit that I love. I love that whole group. I love everything about them. And I mean...
Hold on, don't get carried out.
Oh my God, I'm going to start going on a tangent about my Jersey Day people.
You can't say your Jersey Day people in an Oklahoma accent.
I didn't have an Oklahoma.
There was like a little twang in there.
Why does everyone keep saying that? I do not have a twang. I am not from Oklahoma. I'm from Missouri.
Fair enough. You got to talk about the show.
So
you're losing them.
Our sister-in-law Shelby brought to our attention that there is now a new show that Netflix has released that is called Love is Blind. And it is pretty much like a social experiment that they stated at the beginning of the show that scientists have come out and said that emotional connection is what like pretty much keeps a relationship together. It's not the physical attraction. So what they're testing in the show is that is love actually blind. So what these people do is they come on to the show and there's like a whole girl section in one half of the house and there's a whole boy section in one half of the house. And then they date, they go on, it's kind of like speed dating, and they go into these pods, but they can't see the other person.
They can just
talk. They're not really supposed to talk about their looks or anything like that. They're just supposed to like have in-depth conversations. But I've seen
a meme that like within the first 30 minutes of the first episode, people tell each other they love each other.
But the thing
it was like one couple.
When I was talking to Shelby, I mentioned this to Shelby, our sister-in-law, is that in the first episode, someone proposes, but I don't know. I don't know how long of a span of time that one episode is, because it is kind of jumping
it's
around.
Edited and could have been more than 1 day and more than one conversation.
Yes, it could have been a few weeks, but from my understanding is that the intention of the show is you go on this like rapid dating. You find the person that you have the best connection with, and then the guy might propose, and then if you accept it, then it's like on to this next stage of if you can survive as a couple in the real world. Like when they're in the dating part, like these pods. They don't have social media, they don't have their phones, they don't have anything, they just have to talk. And then I haven't seen anything further, but from my understanding is the next step, then they go out back into the real world, they live together, which again, they've just spoken to each other, they've never seen each other, but these people are now like one couple legitimately got engaged.
It sounds like stress testing a relationship. How quickly and how fast can we go before the whole thing breaks?
The crazy thing is that like majority of sometimes the people that go on this show kind of just want their 15 minutes of fame, and you can tell that. None of these people are acting like that. And normally you can really spot it on like in the first episode that you're like, okay, you're, I want to say douche, but I've been saying something. Anyways, so yes, in the first episode, a couple gets engaged, and then they show each other what they look like. Both people were happy in the situation, and I turned it off because I was like, this is getting real, and I'm gonna get hooked, and I'm not gonna be able to turn it off. And if Steven doesn't want to watch it with me, I need to stop it now. I really just turned it on so that I could help myself get through a workout.
So, well, that's good. I'm glad that you're finding ways to power through them workouts. So what was what do you think?
Well, in the beginning, I was like, this is crazy, and it's also a lot like The Circle. And then I kept watching. I cried. I was like, excuse me?
Why does it make you cry?
I got all teary-eyed because you know me. There's three reasons
because they were like talking very like touchy-feely.
Yes, and then one of the guys started getting all teary-eyed, and you know that's one of my criterias is if guys are crying.
It makes you cry?
I cry instantly because you don't normally see that. You don't see that vulnerability from a guy, and it literally just made me want to like go running up there and be like, don't hurt Cameron. I mean, like all of the, I literally am gonna like ninja kick the chick in the face.
So do you think these people, I mean, it's hard to get context on what these people's lives are before these shows, but
I mean, they tell you their job.
Like, do you think these people have been in deep committed relationships before?
You don't know. Like, one of the guys admits,
or it's just like infatuation over the fact that this is like the first time they've opened up to another human being.
There's all ages all over the place because there's like a guy that's on there, he's like 24, and then there's like guys and girls in their 30s. So I mean, it's a vast difference of ages. But there's like one guy on there that's like 31, and I haven't really gotten a whole lot of. He hasn't really been on the show a whole lot, but he's already admitted that he's a virgin. And the guys were like shocked. I do though kind of feel like the premise of the show I think it will break down. I think it will fail. Because while I understand but none of these people are not attractive. Like all of these people are like. Well, so is that really battle testing the hypothesis though? I mean, they are because they're keeping them blind and you don't know. But if you're using like genuinely attractive young people. I mean, okay, here's the thing. What if I fall for it? What if I'm a 25-year-old and I'm speaking to like let's say a 65-year-old woman, and I fall in love with her? You don't think that that's going to change the calculus? No, they're allowed to say their age to each other. But also, there's nobody of that greatest difference. Like, there's two people talking right now that I thought maybe would get together, and there's like a 10-year difference. So like then the scientist in me is kind of like, so the results of this experiment will only be relevant for people between ages 25 and 35 that have normal BMIs I'm not saying that they're all like models. I'm saying that they're not. There's no obese people on this show. There's not like. I don't like this conversation now.
You just see where like the skeptic in my head. That's the skeptic.
That's why I'm saying watch
the cynic in
the
me
show.
starts going.
This is what's frustrating to me is because you're wanting me to relay the information, but then you're asking all these questions. It's like just watch the show with me so you can form your own opinion.
I'm forming my own opinion as you're telling me about it.
Yes, and
so
you do that, but then as soon as I turn it on to start watching it again, you're going to sit there and start asking me all these questions.
Of course I'm
like you do with every show I watch. And you're always like, this show is stupid. And then you're like, who's she? Who's that guy talking to her?
Okay, so since I haven't watched my episode, I'll just offer kind of my preconceived notions based on past beliefs. Okay, one.
Past beliefs. Because he's a natural born cynic.
No, these are just beliefs I have. Okay, I agree. Emotional attachment, emotional connection is what sustains a relationship. I agree with that. However, I think there is something to be said about the physical component of a relationship. After
the first episode, they showed a trailer that shows the whole entire season. And what you were saying showed in that trailer to become true. Because there was a lot of like, as soon as they saw each other, then you heard a couple people like say, "Oh my God, I made a mistake."
Yeah, or, not only on that show, but how many times do we see that play out on Catfish? Because Catfish is like a very similar social experiment in the sense that yes, these people are being lied to, but both parties, even the ones being lied to and the ones they are having real emotional connections.
No, and I agree, but I also disagree with you because
then all of a sudden they get confronted and they're like, oh, this person is like a 80-year-old dude, I'm not interested. Or, oh, this person is like a obese 18-year-old, oh, I'm not interested. Like the physical, all the emotional connection in the world cannot hurdle lack of physical interaction when it comes to a romantic relationship, in my opinion.
I don't like saying never because I don't think it's
the majority. I'll say the majority. Yeah, that's fair. You shouldn't always use never.
Because I'm sure there is some exceptions to the rule out there of people. And also on Catfish, that's kind of a slightly different situation because like going into that, you're like, yes, I have a connection with that person, and then when you see them and they aren't the person that they said they were, it's not just the fact that they look different physically, it's the fact that you've been blatantly lied to.
Yeah, fair
and
enough.
And then you feel uncomfortable in the situation because you literally don't know what part of that conversation was real at that point.
I will give you that, but I'll also say the lying seems to become becomes less of an issue, less significant of an issue when the party who was lied to meets the person and they are a attractive individual of the sex that person is interested in. The lying is less of a thing. Like, we can work through that.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that I can have an emotional connection with another woman, but I'm not a lesbian.
No, I get it, but that's what
those people are very valid to not want to be.
They are valid, but that still goes to my point of like there are hurdles, in my opinion. There are hurdles in which no amount of emotional connection can get over when it comes to the physical dimension in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out on that show. The second thing that's very interesting to me is the willingness of these people to live with each other so soon.
That's literally the whole experiment.
Like
they tell them that
I'd be worried about my own personal safety. Like, what if I met a Ted Bundy?
Well, I mean, there's cameras still in the apartment. Like, it's not like they just go and...
You don't know. I mean, there's some psycho people. I would
okay, Steven, because Netflix isn't going to, vet the people that they throw into the room together.
I don't know. I'm just saying. So those are my two hot takes. I'll commit to watching an episode with you. We can talk about it. But I also
would like you to commit to two because Shelby said that the first two were her favorite.
Okay, I'll commit to the first 2 episodes, but I reserve the right to bow out after that.
You're gonna bow out just because that's who you are, and then every single time I start watching, I'm gonna be like,
what's
5
going on
episodes.
there?
Yes.
Oh, what's happening?
I'm gonna be
what
literally, guys. I would like to point out that one of the biggest shows that Steven hated me watching all the time, but had a million questions whenever I'd be watching it. Vampire Diaries.
Because the analytical part of my brain.
Steven,
I can't help it.
You would pause. You'd sit down and you'd start asking questions about characters.
Yes, because it's like when it's.
But you hated the show. Literally, you would sit there and be like, "This is stupid."
It's like when the Oscar on The Office is like, the analytical part of me wants to, or he's like, the analytical part of me wants to examine it, he says something like the human part of me or whatever. He's like, the other part of me knows that it has no substance. That's the fight.
That's so rude. That's like saying that all the shows I watch.
No, that's not. I mean, that's a little extreme, but I can't help myself.
I think everything I watch is soul gripping.
All right. So on the note of relationships, this is somebody that I really like listening to. His name's Tom Bilyeu. He started the company, or him and 2 other people started the company Quest Nutrition. But like since then, he's kind of like broadened out into this whole other, like just like more of an influencer role, and they're building this company that's focused on like making content and merch around like just improving yourself basically in general, kind of like a self-development sort of brand, but very focused on trying to get certain things across. It's hard to explain. I think it's still called impact theory, or maybe it's impact theory. They have a podcast, they do videos, that sort of thing. But he put this post on his Instagram with his wife about like the top rules or whatever, 9 lessons or whatever they learned in how to be successful at their marriage. So I wanted to share them and just kind of like see what you thought.
Why are you already giggling? Because
the first one they put on there is have sex often.
Okay.
Do you think that an important one for?
Our family members listen to this podcast, and you know how uncomfortable this conversation makes me.
Okay, well, I think it's important. Communicate obsessively.
I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think it's clear that we think it's important because that's like
all we talk about. Yeah.
Communication.
We talk about we communicate about communication.
We do.
A lot.
I don't care. Like people probably are annoyed with how much I over communicate, but I don't think you can over communicate. I think if you're not communicating, like
if you're not communicating, you are not fighting for yourself.
No, yeah, and like obviously shit's gonna break. Like eventually crap's gonna break.
Well, people just don't like to hear the truth in situations sometimes. And I've even started to become a little bit more blunt in situations like, I don't think it's recording.
Oh shit, did I hit this? Ah, man. More of an influencer role, and they're building this company that's focused on like making content and merch. Okay, we'll just start again.
Production fail. You sat the iPad down on your laptop.
I hit the space bar. Okay, so where we left off. I'm talking about Tom Bilyeu and this post he put on Instagram about the 9 lessons that him and his wife have learned over their 17 years of marriage. And I think their angle here was like, here's 9 important lessons to like that make marriage better or help your marriage be better.
Or at least from what they've learned in their
correct, just to share their own experience. Number 1 is have sex often. I think that's important. You're obviously uncomfortable with that.
I'm just uncomfortable talking about it, is what I'm saying.
Number 2 is communicate obsessively. I think that's super important. I think it's clearly important for us.
And like what I said is whenever I realized it was off, don't put it down on the laptop again. I said that we communicate a lot about communication on our podcast. So I think obviously we agree with number 2.
Yeah, and I think I just like, what else are you doing if you're not communicating?
Yes.
That's kind of like the heart of it all.
Yes.
Lift each other up, which I think is really important. You have to have, I totally agree. You have to have
I kind of like it as hype up your bae.
Yeah, you do. You have to be there. Like, everyone's going to have their down days. Everyone's going to have their rough patches, and you've got to be that person to step in and.
Well, I speaking on that, because that kind of just jogged my memory. There's a whole little section on TikTok of couples like hyping the other one up, but it's like in the most random ways of just choosing a whole entire day and not telling their spouse that they're going to do it, but they kind of record them, and then all day long they're like the guy will be like, "You cut that bread, honey," like stuff like that. And just seeing their reactions to it, because by the end of the video they're like smiling so big because their spouse was just like paying attention to them all day, and he'd be like, "Yeah, you opened that door, honey," and stuff like that. And it's just the cutest.
I always think it's really cute when couples. I think it's really cute when couples are like super into each other. I think it's really cute when couples are super into each other, super infatuated with each other, even like couples that have been together for a long time. And I also think it's cute when couples build each other up like that, to like know that each of you is still attracted to each other, and then each of you is still rooting for each other. I think is awesome.
Which I think me and you should start doing that, just randomly, just hyping up some random nonsense.
You're doing a great job on this podcast.
Yeah.
You're killing it.
Woo!
Their fourth lesson is be honest, especially when it's hard.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Huge, because
it's so hard though. It's so hard to be honest when you know like this may like you, especially when you're somewhat aware of what your partner's existing insecurities are, and you know what you're gonna say is gonna kind of touch around them or even just drill it.
But the biggest thing is that I know just from my life in general, not even just relationship status, just my life in general, because I was not the best kid growing up. I could have been a lot worse, but I'm saying I wasn't the best, and my mom always found out. Like, it's just the dirt will spill at some point. It's just whether you want to take the reins of it or you're going to let someone else to take the reins.
Yeah, and I think,
which is going to be worse.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the context of a marriage, like, to your point is, if you're not honest about it now, at some point you're going to be honest about it, and it may not be.
It's going to hurt worse.
Yeah, it may not be the best timing. Be a good leader and a good follower.
Yes.
Which is hard, like that, because I think everyone has like their innate, like they tend to be a leader or they tend to be a follower.
I think I tend to be a follower.
But I think that's each of you has to know, because you have to be willing at times to like compromise and follow one person's vision in one aspect, and maybe then follow the other person's vision in another.
Yeah, but I think you are more of the leader in our relationship, but I also think that sometimes you demonize the leadership role in your head, that it's almost like a bad thing of being a leader.
Not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's two. You
feel like it's like control.
Yeah, like I don't want to be overly controlling, like because I think that's been something like, as a man, like you don't want to be foreseen as like being controlling of your, especially of your female partner. Like you don't want to be this over domineering person. You want to have space for that to be more egalitarian.
But I find that funny because I trust your instinct.
True, and that's where every relationship is going to have its own dynamic.
That I'm okay with following and stuff. And it's funny when we have those conversations, because you'll bring something up and then I'm like all for following you, and you're like, is that okay, or is that?
I think, and then I was gonna say that,
you, like,
and
try to reassert?
the second part of it too is sometimes I'm like, I don't want, like, sometimes it's like I don't want to have to lead this. I don't want to have to, like, it's the like it feels like more weight.
Yeah.
You know, but that's obviously like just something I have to work through and get over and be like, that's what I'm.
But I think you feel that way is because in your head you put negative things attached to being the leader of our relationship.
Fair enough. Forgive mistakes.
Not necessarily a relationship, just in certain aspects of our life.
Yeah, no, I agree. Forgive mistakes fast.
I think that's huge.
I think I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Thanks for pointing it out.
No, I think
I do think that I have grown a lot in that aspect of our relationship in the 10 years that we've been together.
Yeah, I don't take any issue with the way you are because I totally know how you are, right? Like you do forgive, you just need some time. You just need a little bit of time. Not like a month. I'm saying like, an hour or two to like calm down, think about things.
Well, because I think I view myself as like I'm like a steam pot or like a tea kettle. Once I have reached the maximum heat, nothing is gonna is gonna bring it down until you remove the heat from the situation.
You need some time.
And so I can't really comprehend what's going on or what needs to be done until I've been brought off the heat.
The next one is hold each other to a high-ass standard. Basically just, Opie, Jesus.
It's getting hot.
What a distraction. Basically just, I think the key here, which, I agree with that sentiment, but I also think that it has to be done with some tact. Like there has
What now?
When holding each other to a high standard.
Yes.
Which I think is good. Like I think it's good to like expect a lot out of each other, but I think there has to be some tact and some gentleness to know
certain aspects of
to know how to go about holding each other to the standard, right? Like you don't want to be an asshole about it or condescending.
Make them feel bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of like, hey, I think you can do better than this. I think you're
And I think that's
capable
what they're meaning is kind of when they're saying holding them to a higher standard. It's helping them realize that they are capable of that standard.
Yes, exactly. 100%. Want the other person to win. which I think is just part of that other, like, lifting each other up. You want to see each other succeed. You don't want to feel like, oh, I have to keep her down so I look better, or you have to keep me down so you look better.
Whoever does that is terrible.
Yeah, that's kind of
terrible.
There's some psychological issues. And make your marriage your highest priority, which personally, I'm like, that's my song, because.
Well, I think I don't know if we've said this before, but I know we've said this in conversation. Is that if you don't view your marriage as a top priority, the whole system is not going to work, because a lot of relationships, just families in general, the woman kind of loses herself in the children aspect of her life whenever she gets involved into that, but then has a hard time remembering that she's still in a relationship with the father. And whenever that happens, I think relationships just become comfortable in the situation, but then as they get older and the children need them less, all of a sudden then they're trying to pick back up the relationship, and they both have grown separately but while being in a. Does that make any sense?
No, I totally agree with you.
And then that's where they.
I think that's a struggle for both parties.
Yeah.
I can see it from a very, very much from a woman perspective, because you're so wrapped up with what you're trying to get done
just
with your kids.
The caretaking of a family as a whole.
Yeah, you can get so wrapped up in that your marriage can kind of become.
And really, in this aspect of life, it's not just a woman that does that. It's one of the partners tends to lose themselves.
But I think
in the children.
maybe more often than not, the female loses themselves in the family and the home. It's very easy for a man to lose themselves in their own ambitions and their work and what they're trying to accomplish outside the home. I think I say that this is one that I really beat the drum on for myself, because putting your marriage as your highest priority has not really been an ideal that has been highly looked upon in male circles. Like, just from like,
or even really females, because I mean, it's
like how many jokes do you know about like men who like make jokes about being married and the old ball and chain, and like just this very negative, like marriage is this thing that's like a chore and it weighs you down, and
that whole culture needs to shift.
And that's what I'm saying. So for like me as a young man and a young husband, putting my marriage on a pedestal and treating it that way is really, really important to me.
That, like what you just said, made me think of something that Gary Vee says. He says that if you go looking for negativity, that's all you're going to find. So if you're just speaking the negativity, you're going to think that. Like, even if it's just in a joking manner to your buddies at work or to your group of friends, you're going to then internalize that negativity, and then it's just going to come back and be kind of the truth in your marriage.
Yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree with that. I think your attitude, what you soak your thoughts in, what you soak your brain in is eventually what's going to live out in your life. And I see it just in like with men I interact with on a daily basis, just, like people who have guys that have been divorced that now like talk about marriage being this very overrated thing that's a waste of time and energy and effort, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that's a big part of the reason why they're probably not in successful marriages, right? That whole attitude.
You can't really be in a successful relationship in general.
But
if you think like
from
that.
a very, very male-oriented perspective, it is. Like I personally, I want to work harder at my marriage than I do at my work. My marriage is the most important thing. It should be the most important thing because it's the thing that is forever, right? Work will come and go. Bosses will come and go. Projects will come and go. Businesses will come and go. Money will come and go.
Very Gary Vee right now.
But
I should like to point that out.
But
I've been now following him, so now
you're on that bandwagon.
now I'm on Gary Vee bandwagon.
Good, it's a good bandwagon. But that's something that like I feel like was something I think about a lot. Like there are definitely times, like, and I can, even though maybe what I do for a living isn't like my deepest passion, there are definitely times where I'm sucked into doing something and it's 5 o'clock and I'd much rather just stay. Like there's a part of me that's like, I want to finish this, I'm in it, I want to finish this work. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, part of prioritizing my family, part of prioritizing my marriage is having the discipline to say, okay, I gave work the 8, 9, 10 hours that I allotted today. I'm not on a deadline. So I need to have the discipline to say, okay, I'm going to put this away and go handle what's really, really important at home. Mm-hmm. And I think in old culture, the old mindset is like, no, spending an extra 2 hours at work is justifiable at the expense of your marriage or your family life. I've never understood
Whichever,
to each his own, but in my world, the way I value things, what I have as set as priorities in my own life, that's not acceptable. If I'm not on deadline, if I don't have something that's crushing to get done, if it's just purely like I'm sucked in, I need to have the discipline to break away, come home, and address those things that I've made commitments to that, like I said, are much more important because they're forever.
Yeah.
Those are things.
But I also view myself doing that to our kids because I think we both have a very same state of mind that once we get on a task, it's very hard for us to break loose of the task if it's not done. Just the same as it's very hard for me to read books because I have to finish the chapter before I can close it. But I do that with the children too, and all day long I'm having to constantly be like, put that down, or stop doing the dishes, or stop doing that because Cal's wanting your attention. Because Cal now is in the stage of life of where he's wanting to engage. He's wanting you to make eye contact with him and talk to him. And even though half the stuff he's talking about is like the same thing repeating over, he can't get it. He can't get it out of his mouth of how he's wanting to say it, and it's like 30 minutes of the same conversation, which I love it. But sometimes when you have that busy brain, you're like, come on, like, just get it out. But yeah, I have to remind myself all day long to like stop what I'm doing, to focus on them, because I'm only gonna have this little stage for like a blink of the eye, and then they're gonna be.
You're right, and it always seems there's this another Eric Thomas video that I watched. I watched this. I first watched this like in December of 19, and I've watched it again and again and again since I first watched it. But there's a story he tells in the video about when he was really the whole video is about how if any area of your life, if the bank account, so to speak, in any area of your life is low, it's because you're taking more than you're giving. You're not adding value in whatever that is, in your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your kids, your work, whatever it is. If you're not getting out of it what you're wanting, then it's because you're taking more than you're giving. And he was talking about how when him and his wife were very early on in their marriage, she said something to him that really it really cut him. He said like more than she's ever cut him before. And he tells a story about how he came home from he's a preacher. That's like where it all started for him. But he came home from college where he had this like youth ministry thing going on, and he makes all these jokes about how he was totally sold out for God, and he was saving souls and doing all this in his mind at the time with these big important things. And when he came home one night from doing all that, from like a meeting or something, whatever, he could tell that like his wife's mood was off, or something was weird. And so he asked her about it, and she kind of tried to do the whole like, oh no, I'm fine, and so he asked her again, and she said that she didn't regret marrying him because she wants to be with him, but she wished that she could go back to the way it was before they got married, because she felt like, she was like, when we weren't married, you were running up behind me, calling me, texting me, like always pursuing me, right? Mm-hmm. Like the way we do, like in relationships, when before all that,
you get comfortable.
Yeah, and she was like, but now that we're married, it's like I'm just here after you're done doing everything else. I get what's left over, right? Yeah. I get the and then,
which isn't always something that like, when somebody is at the end of their day and had to been like so outgoing or whatever, like I get where she's coming from, because I know that outgoing, because you're an introvert, that's hard for you sometimes. And so like when you come home at the end of the day, your tank is very like little. And it's hard for you to keep going.
I felt convicted by that because it made me ask that question of myself, because he went on to say that like you're not getting a divorce because you're the husband of the year, right? That's what was his point. He's like, his point was, your wife sees you. Your wife sees what you can be. They see how you pour it out for your job, how you pour it out for all these projects. They see the effort and the level of commitment and the level of activity that you can put into all these different things in your life. And then naturally they're comparing that to the level of activity and the level of effort that you're putting into the relationship, that the area of your life they're a part of.
Yeah.
And he was like, probably what your wife is thinking, that that's great that you're going out there and killing it and giving it out for the job and everything, but she's probably thinking like, I want to be the job. Yeah. She wants that same level of energy and commitment. And so for me personally, wanting to put my marriage up on a pedestal, not only for myself and our relationship, but also as a North Star for my sons, to show them that this is the level of effort you should be putting forth in this area of your life.
Yeah.
I always want to be looking at that and saying, okay, how much effort am I putting in here? Okay, I should always be putting in 100, 110%, 120% more in my marriage, in our relationship, because I know you're always going to be understanding. You're always going to be understanding that, I work, you're always going to be understanding that we have to do these things. We have to do these things to live and maintain our life. But I also don't want to take that for granted.
Yeah, you don't want the other person to feel forgotten.
Yeah, and so I just that one lesson I think is so key, and it's just it's hard though, from a female perspective, or at least from a male perspective, looking at how it is on a female end. I feel like that is such a natural thing. It's such a natural thing to invest into your marriage, and it's such a natural thing to make your marriage a priority.
For women.
For women. Also? That's how I perceive it. I
feel like women get lazy in other aspects. Of like they become comfortable. Like what's funny is that as you're saying this, I kind of viewed it as a different angle of like where am I going with this? Like, so Tan from the Queer Eye show, he made a point to talk to this woman about how she still needs to take care of herself to be appealing to her husband. And he wasn't trying to be like, you have to look hot for your husband all the time. He was more of meaning like, you still need to show the same amount of effort that you were showing when you were dating.
Yeah,
and it's like of the same aspect.
It's the same idea. You're right.
And he was like, you have, if you get comfortable and kind of give up on all of that, of the romance and stuff like that, he was like, it's not going to stick around.
It's not. And Lane, the way Lane would put it, it's like, you should be pursuing each other that same way. The way you pursued your spouse to get them to marry you is the way you should continue to pursue them.
Yeah.
And that is the sentiment I think I want to strive for and try to live out. And on top of that, I want to be an example. I want to set an example so that and since you said that you've been on the Gary Vee bandwagon, one of the things Gary Vee talks about is how he wants to make empathy and kindness cool. Yeah. Right? The way that one generation thought growing up being like a tough, hard, rough, cutthroat person was cool to be, like that was, he wants to flip that and be like kindness, empathy, love, that's what's cool, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a personal, on my end, is like, I want to make being a good husband cool. Like, I want to make pursuing your wife cool.
Yeah.
Right? In the way that the previous generation, it was like cool to kind of be like aloof about your marriage and kind of like, oh yeah, that's my old ball. Like that was what it was cool to be like about your marriage.
It kind of makes me think of another chick I follow, which I know we've kind of ran over our time here, but she has always said this statement, always more. That's like what she lives by. She said there's always more grace to be given. There's always more love to be given. And she literally has like made this whole line of shirts and stuff like that. And people are tattooing it on themselves, always more. Which I think is like amazing to think about.
Yeah, like Bob Goff's quote, like more love and grace, less of everything else.
Yes. But like just simple, like just 2 words. Yeah. If you could, like, if you need a tattoo, like she said she would write it on her hand before every single race she ever ran, because it always reminded her that she could always give a little bit more effort. And I was like, that is like,
yeah, Casey Neistat he literally has tattooed on his arm, do more. That has a tattoo.
But it's like, that's that simple thing, that simple statement, always more, is literally like huge to me. And like just hearing her say that, and like actually, because I've always seen her line of clothes and I've never really understood, but actually like hearing it, it's like so impactful of just thinking always more. You could always be a little bit more nicer, and you could always give a little bit more grace and love. And I think that that's a lot of people should live like that more.
We didn't get to one of the topics that I felt like we should have talked about, but we can just port it for next week, or we can hold it for next week. Going to Seek House Preschool.
Yeah.
We can talk about that next time.
Okay.
Is that it? Anything else?
No.
All right. Sorry about the production mishap and pausing the podcast. But we got it done anyways. Thanks for listening.
I kind of feel like you should keep the YouTube video the same though, because it's funny. I think it would be funny to see my reaction when I realize that it's not.
Okay, I won't
recording.
edit. I won't edit the video version. And for the audio version, I'll just talk in a little piece about how I messed up. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We got a little long-winded on these topics, but
they're important.
They're important, and if you guys have any suggestions for future episodes or feedback, please find us on Instagram. My handle's at steven.freeborn. You can find Kelsey at kfreeborn412. It's the best way to connect with us. But until next time, we hope you guys have a good day, good rest of your week, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.